All right, guys, it's time for the Next Level Guy Show, a men's interview, interest, and improvement focused podcast featuring interviews with the greats from all industries to help you better your life. Each week, a new episode features an interview with one of the greats, covering all aspects of their story, from life hacks to tips and protocols that have allowed them to live life on the next level. We then highlight concrete action steps that you can use to improve your life. And now, your host, Ian Dawson Mackay.
And today's guest is Brad Baych. Brad is a classically trained chef and a former butcher. He's now a YouTube sensation known as the Butcher Wizard. His love of all things meat inspired the creation of his YouTube channel in 2022, which focuses on showing viewers how to butcher large cuts of meat so they can save money and make better meals. The channel teaches butchery, meat cutting, prep and storage, with some very tasty recipe videos for using the cuts of meats mentioned in the videos. He has several videos that are now in the millions of views after only a short time, and his passion for cooking, cutting meat and saving you money makes this a must-subscribe channel, in my opinion. And in this interview, we cover how to save money by buying more, how to pick better quality meat at the grocery store, ways to batch meals, store food better, knife tips, and so much more. And now, let's get to the interview. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's an absolute pleasure to find somebody like yourself who loves meat just as much as I do. I can't help salivating, and I had to subscribe straight away. Maybe that's a new tagline for you, salivating and subscribing. But for those people who maybe don't know the genius that is Brad Baych, how would you describe yourself? How would you explain what you do? Because you've got an awesome job.
Yeah, well, I teach people how to save money on cutting meat themselves at home. So I have a YouTube channel that I teach these simple things where you go to a grocery store, you get a bigger cut of meat than you're normally used to, and cut it down yourself so that you can save money and get a better quality product in the process. I also teach people how to cook meat and do all kinds of different preparations. I started my career. I've always been in food. I've always been in the restaurant business. So I've taught culinary school. I went to culinary school. So again, I have a long career in food, and I just like to share it with people.
And was there a particular moment that got you into food? Did you used to cook with your parents? Did you have a particular meal that set off? What was that turning point that really inspired you to get into food?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting story. I don't really have like a great background or a moment in which I can think about when I wanted to start going into food. My first job as a 16-year-old. So when I turned 16, I went out to like fill out a bunch of applications to get a job, and I got a job in um, a a restaurant that cooked soup. And they wanted it was a soup and salad place, so it had big salad bar and soup. And I was hired to learn how to do the soup section. So that was really the only cooking that was going on in the whole place. And I just fell in love with the restaurant business. I fell in love with just the whole process of cooking something, and that kind of I never looked back. I just always had I would try to get out of the restaurant business, and then I'd seem to find my way back in. So it was always a comfortable place for me.
Because you seem to have covered a wide range. You're classically trained. You're teaching people how to use it on YouTube. That you ran a culinary school. You've done all these amazing things. But would you say you have a food philosophy? What's your style of cooking? Because you're classically trained, but what would you say you are now?
I think most of what I do now is just kind of teaching people how to get the most out of their grocery budget and how to get the most from um, just it's hard these days. I have a big family. I have 4 kids, so that's what I'm doing now is, like, I cook a lot in bulk. I try to find the best deals that I can. I think it's important now more than ever that people learn how to cook and they learn how to save the most money possible, and I think
Hmm.
that's what I kinda resonate with my audience on YouTube, is the fact that I do save money in an area in which it's hard to save money because people think that this like the butchery world is so much shrouded in like I need all this education or I need all this know-how, and you do, but you don't have to go to school for it. You can learn the things on YouTube.
Because that's what I love about your show is you show how to do it. You know, it's not just get it from your butcher. You actually break it down and you kind of remove the mystique of it. But I mean, you did classical training as part of your education. How do you see the transition between what you were taught and how people approach food now with the celebrity chefs and all these sort of these kind of fancy shows? How do you think has it transitioned for the better? Do you find food more exciting now, or is it just like me, you're trying to get as much bang for your buck because with the prices nowadays, or how have you seen that change?
Well, I think when people watch stuff on TV, which are the TV shows are great and get people interested, but like they're trying to get the most drama and stuff like that. Where when you're actually doing the thing, you're actually cooking for your family. You're actually you're you're really trying to get meal like a dinner on the table. It's a
Yeah.
completely different animal. So I think the biggest thing that people can do is just like keep everything. I like to keep everything super simple and not get really fancy. I don't want to spend 6 hours in the kitchen every day. I want to get in, get out, and get a meal on the table. And I think one thing that culinary school or one teaching it taught me was the technique part is the most important part. So I don't need to like spend a bunch of time like pouring over a recipe because I know how to saute something. I know how to braise something.
Hmm.
It's the simple techniques that can be done over and over again that are that's the part that you really need to get.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, like MasterChef and these sort of things are great, but it's all about the look and it's style over substance. It's not about filling your kids' bellies or your the partner who's just come in from a full day shift. 4 kids, man, that's my sister's got 3, and I like being the fun uncle and being able to hand them back. Hats off to you, running a business, well, an empire, and having kids as well. You're a brave man. So, what was the inspiration then to start the channel? Did you see that a cat in the market that kind of, oh, well, there is the opportunity to teach people? A lot of people are struggling.
Well, it's kind of all came together. I was in a point in my life, I had just come off of being a stay at home dad for a lot of years. And then I really wanted to get back into teaching people because that was one of the favorite things I've ever done is be a culinary school instructor. That was like the pinnacle of, I love to teach people who had very little knowledge and really pour into them and just teach them all these things I've learned over my career. So it was, I was like, how can I do that now while I was just, like I said, I was just coming off of being a stay at home dad. Well, I said, well, I'll just do some YouTube videos.
Hmm.
And it was kind of a happy accident because I was like, I love the butchery. That was my favorite thing to do. So I'll start with that. And then my 8th video went crazy. It got 1 million views in 4 days. So I took a whole ribeye that I got from Costco and I show people how to cut it into ribeye steaks and what to do with it. And for whatever reason, it just took off. And I use that kind of springboard to then go, okay, well, let me do another cut of meat and another cut of meat. And here we are, a year and a half or so later, and it's just been a crazy ride.
Because that's what I love about your channel is I learned so many things about particular types of meats, better alternatives, but just silly things like how buying some sliced meat is actually far less beneficial to you in the long run to get to breaking it down yourself. And of course, we all think there's, like you were saying earlier, it's all these complicated things, but with a bit of guidance, and you have this unique, amazing ability to teach. You're a natural teacher. And I can't watch one of your videos without learning something. But what is your sort of understanding of the butchery industry just now? You know, like before you would see one on every high street. Now they're in supermarkets or they're in very kind of specialist areas, maybe a bit more pricey in some bits. How have you seen the industry change since you were doing your butchery compared to now? Do you think we'll ever get back to your local butcher the way we used to?
It's kind of interesting because I think that the actual business behind a butcher shop is very difficult. Selling meat is very difficult. There's very low margins, and um, it's I just said it. The local butcher shop is just so hard to do
Yeah,
profitably. That's why it kind of went, with grocery stores, and now it's kind of going. There's online butcher shops where they are focusing a lot on the higher end meats, like the wagyu, the different kinds of like specialty butcher shop, like specialty cuts and things like that. So I really think that it's it's just such a hard business to get into, that there's less and less of them. That's why there's so many decreasing numbers of butcher shops. You can still find them, and people really have to go and seek that out if they want that kind of personal experience with a butcher. But I had to say, most people are have a grocery store they go to, and they're just kind of given what the grocery store, or they are handed what the grocery store gives them. So
yeah.
um, that's why I think it's, to put it in your own hands, is it gives the power back to you, where you can, like, okay, now I can learn how to cut these things, and it's not that hard. You know, we're not breaking down like whole steers. We're just breaking down these simple cuts that it anyone can do it.
I mean, I love how in your videos you sort of show the quality of the meat and why you'd pick that over that. But then it's also that kind of, well, if you get that, you could have 3 or 4 meals out of it. You could do this, this, and this. And you're so reassuring. You're like the meat daddy. It's probably, I don't know if that's a nickname you particularly want, but you
Hey,
know, and you just come away and you always think, well, I want to try that. I'm going to try that the next time I'm in the supermarket. And I think that's the sad thing is butcher shops used to be the local place where you'd meet your neighbors and you would be getting something for your dinner and for the week. And same with the milkman. And now we've kind of ordered it all online. And it's such a shame. But now with the rise of these things, like Just Eat and like our local delivery shops here for takeaways, these kind of state, what's it, that fresh, I can't remember what the name of it is. Like you can buy your and get the grocery sent to you as a meal packs, and like you're saying about the wagyu, the prime cuts and stuff. How have you seen the meat or how we consume meat change over the last sort of 20 odd years? Do you think it's better the way we kind of approach tackling what we eat now?
I think, like, for the consumer, it's mainly broken down into like steak cuts and ground beef is kind of like the two ends of the spectrum. So, like, I think when people those are two things people are buying in bulk. And I like, what I try to do also is show you how to break those things down, but also in that middle range. So, like the chuck roasts, like the things that come off of the out of the chuck. That's my favorite cut, is from the chuck. So you get all these different cool cuts out of there, but you have to kind of do them yourself, because the grocery stores spend most of their time talking about steaks and ground beef and kind of that middle area. It just kind of there's not that much demand for some of these cuts, so they just don't offer them.
Because that was the frustrating thing. There was times I was like, "Oh, that looks really good," and then try find, you'd see it maybe in other videos, and like you'd go and try find it, and you go, "Oh no, we don't supply that. No, we're not. No one's interested in that sort of thing." And but now you start seeing all these kind of like Oriental and Jamaican spices in your supermarket, things that were never possible. And now we were starting to open up our abilities, but it's getting people's confidence to just try something a bit. So, how if somebody's a bit maybe nervous about starting to eating a bit more meat, maybe they want to expand their repertoires. How do you start encouraging somebody as the meat daddy? How do you encourage them to start? I don't know, just embracing meat more. This is going to sound really
Yeah,
bad.
no, it's fine. I think yeah, the meat puns are plentiful, but no, I think for somebody it depends on what your individual tastes are because like you have some people who love like a ribeye, like fattier cuts of meat, and you have some people who like leaner cuts of meat. So I think knowing kind of where all these cuts are on the cow and like what they taste like, how much fat to lean ratio there is. That's the biggest thing is like, what's your personal preference? So, you know, and once you go into that and you figure that out, then we can kind of break that down further and like, okay, I like a ribeye. So if I want to save money on a ribeye, there is a cut called the chuck eye steak. I don't know what it's called in other places in the world, but in the United States, it's called the chuck eye. It's basically a 4-inch portion of the ribeye that's in the chuck, and they cut it. They sell it as for chuck prices, but it's really a ribeye. So that's kind of like where I go. We're like trying to find these little hacks that can save people money and get them that experience they're looking for. But again, it's just kind of like what are you into and trying to find those cuts that are the best for that purpose.
I mean, I think that's why your videos do so well, is because you're not just saying try that, and add this. You're actually showing us how to cook and how to prepare things, but then how to prep it and store it. But you're not doing it the patronizing videos that you see in some place. You're doing that sort of, like a coach, a guide, a friend. But you have a really great way of teaching it. Is there? I can't remember the name of it. I think it was like flat iron, and there was some eye steak that I remember reading some butcher saying these are the cats that butchers tend to keep for themselves. Are there secret cats that butchers are? I don't know if you can break the butcher code, but that you would think everybody should try because they're so good that we tend to keep for ourselves.
Yeah, like I said, that chuck eye steak is great. A Denver steak is also like usually those butcher cuts, what they call like the butcher's saving them, are some cuts that they find in cheaper cuts of meat or cheaper like subprimal cuts that no one else knows about. So
Hmm.
like I said, the chuck eye and the Denver steak are two great ones that come out of the chuck. The flat iron also comes out of the chuck. It's a great steak. It's gotten more and more popular recently. I would say in the last couple of years. The hanger steak is great. There's a like I said, there's a bunch of these little steaks that they're little cuts of meat that are stuck in these like more tough primal cuts of meat, and it takes a little bit of a butcher know-how to kind of get them out. But if you can find them, they're great.
Because that's what I like about like your blog and your website. You've got pictures of the animal and showing where each cat of meat comes from. When I grew up in the Highlands of Scotland, we raised sheep and lambs and stuff. We've got cattle now, so you kind of get used to knowing where your food comes from, seeing animals being born, you know, dead through predators or abattoirs and things like that. So you understand the cycle, but does it scare you the amount of people that don't understand how their food is sourced or where it's prepped from or how little knowledge they have behind the where what they're eating?
Yeah, I think it's one of these things like you do need to know kind of where your food comes from. Also, even more so, like where the cuts come from on the animal and what it means to have like so each muscle group that has more work in the animal is going to be a tougher cut of meat, but it's also a more flavorful cut of meat. So you you always balance this tenderness and flavor kind of like um, the more the more tender it is, the less flavorful it is, and opposite is true also. And I think through a little bit of knowledge about how muscle groups are, you can learn more about, like, okay, if I get something out of the round, it's going to be tougher because that's near the hind leg. It's going to get a lot of work, so it's going to be tougher, but it's going to have a little more flavor. Where your short loin, which is where your tenderloin and New York strip come from, then those are going to be more tender but a little less flavorful. So I mean, it's just I think everyone could use a little more knowledge, and that's why I think my channel is so popular, or is getting more popular, is because people are into learning more about this. Almost, I always tell somebody who asks me, it's kind of like, yes, I can get the grocery store to cut all this meat, but I could also get someone to mow my lawn, or I could get someone to wash my car, or it's you're learning a new skill, you're learning a new thing, and I think it's coming into fashion to kind of learn about butchery.
It's definitely something I've been wanting to try a bit more of, but it's that fear into it though. If you buy, say, a £50 bit of meat or $8 meat, and then suddenly you go, I've just hacked the crap out of that, and I'm sitting with a bit here. I've wasted this bit. How do you start getting into the habit of, okay, I'm going to try that? How would you get over that initial thing? Because I know you've got some great blog posts, and one of them is like how to take, I think it's pork chops and split them into 3 meals. And that would be for a mom who's looking to feed her kids, think, oh, brilliant, I can make a menu out of this. How would you start that? Is it the chuck would be a great thing to start? Like, what's a great practice piece of meat to begin with?
Yeah, I always tell people if they're really new, so you're really new, you don't have how to handle a knife very well, like start with something like a pork is a great way to start, because it's cheaper. So you can get a pork tenderloin, you can get a pork loin, and just kind of work on those skills of taking down the fat, taking off the silver skin of the pork tenderloin, cutting them into portions, and that way you kind of get some confidence on something that maybe isn't as expensive before you go and tackle some of the bigger steak cuts. Um, then it's kind of like the actual steak cuts, so the ribeye, the New York strip, are actually really easy to deal with. You're basically just trimming up a little bit and then cutting them into the portions. So they're expensive, but they're also the easiest to deal with. When you get into like the chuck rolls, what we call it, and it's the cut that has the chuck roasts and the Denver steaks and the chuck eye steaks. There's a little bit of technique involved, to get the right steaks out of there. But even if you mess it up, you can still cube it all up. You can still braise it. You can still grind it. So even if you mess it up, you don't really, it's not like you got to throw it away or something. You can still enjoy it.
I love that. I love that there's a fail safe to fall back. That kind of moment of, even if you do bugger it, you've still got. I think, was it Tim Ferriss? He said in his 4 Hour Chef book, don't try to cut certain things while you're needing it for a dinner party. Practice it. Like, I think, I can't remember what example he has, but it's literally just sit and cut up. But maybe it was an onion while you're watching a TV show, just to get into the habit. Is that the sort of thing that you do to get this sort of the nuance and the skilled sort of maneuvers with a knife to know how to cut, and how to follow the grain and all that kind of stuff? Is it almost kind of feel more than skill in a way?
It's all about practice. I mean, any skill like is all about practice. So I think what people who jump into whatever skill it is think that I'm going to jump in and be like awesome at it the first time I try it. And it does take a little bit of feel. You got to try it a couple times and you'll get better at it as you do it. That's the thing when you watch like the people at the butcher shop, they do this thing all day long. It was not uncommon to trim 50 tenderloins in one day. That was not uncommon. So um, if you do something 50 times, then you're going to get a lot better at it. So I think with
Good.
people at home, it's hard because you just get the one shot. So my advice would be just to continue, even if you mess something up, just continue, keep going, keep doing it, keep practicing.
Because I love that thing you were saying earlier about how if the muscle is used more, it's a more flavorful bit of meat, like depending on where it's capped from. Was there any other surprises that you found during the butcher shop that kind of, or a certain kind of cat or a certain kind of animal that gave this, I don't know, this kind of encyclopedia, this orgasm of flavor or whatever it was? Like was there something? Was there animals that you, or cats that you just were blown away by that you learned during your time there?
Yeah, I think for me, it's more like how you prepare it. So I love things that are slow cooked, that are braised, that are put them on the smoker, like the beef ribs kind of thing, or short ribs that have been braised like for several hours and they shred apart. That's my personal that's what I do a lot of times is I like that well cooked shreddable things. So I
I'm
mean
getting hungry.
that's where I gravitate towards most often, and those cuts that do well, those tougher cuts do really well for those braising techniques.
Because you mentioned earlier about you focus more on technique, not rigidly following recipes. And I had to take the note of the book where you mentioned, is it On Food and Cooking, The Science and Lore of the Kitchen by Harold McGee, is one you said was like one of your favorite books. How how much of science and understanding of, like marinating techniques and time and cooking methods and that, how much of that do we have to understand to become a good cook, in your opinion?
I think technique is everything. Like being you can having a good quality product is very important, but also what you do with it, that's the most important thing, because
Mm.
you can take something that is expensive, that's perfect, that's a piece of meat that's great, and you can destroy it and not and it could ruin the whole dinner. Whereas you can take something that's maybe doesn't start out as great and really through technique make it really really good. One of the things that I've been doing recently are called I love Mexican cuisine. So the birria tacos has been something that you may have seen on TikTok or Instagram Reels or something like that, where they'll take a chuck roast, simple chuck roast, they will stew it with chilies and beef broth and give all those great Mexican flavors to, shred it up, put it in a taco, and kind of grill it and melt that cheese. And it has all these great, it's each, so the whole taco is way better than the sum of its parts. So I think that, like I said, technique is everything, and you can really transform a lesser cut of meat into something really great.
I knew I should have done this before, Eddie, and I am now desperate. I'm just like, my brain is like, oh, imagine that just now. So how do we start this process? I mean, you buy the piece of meat, you bring it home, and it's almost like your first kid. You kind of go, what do I do now? It's like I've now taken my baby home, and I'm like, what on earth do we do? How do we start prepping this? Because you see most people say, take it out of the fridge, 10 minutes to room temperature, stick it in a hot pan, wait till it's almost smoking, and then cook it. Then nobody kind of really understands about how to sear and how much fat to take off, or should I leave it on? Or how do we start things like considering marinating, prepping? What do we have to have ready? What are sort of the minimum things that you think everybody should have before they start?
Yeah, I think some of the basics. If you're gonna do like a steak, so we need a, you know, I like a cast iron skillet. It's one of my favorites. And one of my favorite pans is cast iron skillet. Getting it super hot, and a simple seasoning, salt and black pepper. If you want to add garlic powder, it's completely up to you, or something like that. I try to keep all the seasonings really really simple. Let the meat be the star of the show, and that's kind of everything else just enhances it. That really hot pan is really vital. Getting a nice sear on it if you're going to saute it or you're going to sear it is getting that nice crusty part is really a big part of your steak experience. So that's really important. Cooking it properly, you need a meat thermometer is probably the best way for people who aren't who haven't worked in a steakhouse and done all that stuff. You know, a good understanding of that. And when you pull it, cooking at the right temperature, pulling it out, letting it rest, understanding that it's going to raise in temperature. That's a big thing that people go to. They're like, I saw the thing online. It said medium rare is 135 degrees. Well, if you pull that steak at 135 degrees and let it rest, it's going to be medium well meat, or it's going to be medium or medium well by the time you want to eat it because of that carryover cooking. So you got to pull it a little bit 10 degrees before. A big secret of every steakhouse is they put a little bit of butter on every steak that goes out. Um, and it melts by the time it gets to your table. So you may not understand, but that's why one of the reasons that a steak at a steakhouse tastes better than the one at your house is because there's a little bit of butter on every one. But yeah, just keeping it super simple. I think that's for me, that's the basics.
Because it's the thing into it nowadays is everything is there's always a level up of, it's like you can get a meat thermometer, but then you can get ones with Bluetooth, you can get ones with apps, you can get ones that are Wi-Fi, and you're kind of like, all I want to do is just know how much is, and I think that sometimes is we cook it well, and then we don't think about, we don't know about resting, or we don't know that it's actually going to keep cooking, or you take it off the when you're frying it and stick it in the oven is actually a good way of cooking. There's all these kind of things. I mean, I interviewed Ben Nebril from Sorted Food, and there were so many things I learned from that show of just how amazing little changes as a home cook could improve your skill. And that's why I'm so glad I found your channel, because you're doing the exact same thing. You're showing people that these things are possible. Is there things that we shouldn't order when we're out that are a waste of money? I seen somewhere about, was it Gunga Foods? He was talking about dry aged foods, meats, because they're not always. They just cook them in a certain way to portray them as dry aged. So you're paying for dry aged, but you're not getting that quality. Is there foods or meats that you think we should all avoid when we're out or in the supermarket?
So it's funny you've mentioned this because there's one thing that is very, very popular on social media, and it is the tomahawk steak. So if you don't
That's
know what that is, so a tomahawk steak is basically a ribeye with a bone that's like 14 inches long or something. And it pains me every time because like the extra bone is just for looks, right? It serves no purpose because they've taken all the meat off the bone. So it is solely for show. So I've seen these on a menu where they'll charge an extra, a steakhouse will charge an extra 20, 30, $40 basically between the ribeye and the ribeye with the huge bone attached to it that you can't eat. So that's one of the things I would personally stay away from because, like I said, it looks good on Instagram, but it's like, but it serves no actual purpose for when you're eating.
so you're telling me I shouldn't get it wrapped in gold leaf and
Yeah,
salt, was it Salt Bay and all that kind of no? Oh, because all I want to think is if I'm holding it, I want more meat on it. It's just I don't understand it, but maybe I'm
hey,
not
like
that.
I said, it looks good. It looks good on social, but that's about it.
And are there shops or brands that you're not? I know you probably don't want to name certain brands, but I mean, how do we make sure that the meat we're picking is ethical, it's cared for? Because people read these things, say, "Oh, grass fed," but it doesn't really mean how that the animal had freedom. Is maybe just in its diet, and like, are there certain buzzwords that you think are a yes and certain words that are an immediate no when it comes? Do you have like a guideline when you pick meats to the color, the source, the feed, etc.?
Yeah, I think with that, with sourcing the meat, you want to get the best that you can, and if you can find a local farm or a local rancher that has and buy from them, that's obviously the best because it's gone the least amount of distance. But it's hard because every time that we come out with a this is organic, this is grass fed, this is it grass finished, all these other different words. There's a lot of like funny business in with the labels. So you just got to kind of do your best. And I always look for fresh, whatever the freshest. You got that nice, dark red color. It has a good amount of fat in it, intramuscular fat, so you can see that it's well marbled. Um, Again, there's only so much you can do because they're like I said, all these words, all these labels can be misinterpreted. They can be
Mm.
kind of gone around. So you just kind of do your best is all I can say in this minefield of terms.
Because it's everybody wants to have like the best story behind their food, but it's also what you can afford for your family, how you can prep, and it's I'd rather feed people than say, oh well, by ethical considerations are against that. When I grew up knowing that where animals were going to come from and where they were going to go, there was a show on our Channel 4 in the UK where they showed you a live animal went in, they showed them how it was killed, like the abattoir section. And this was all like in the studio audience, but then they showed you the butcher, how he would skin it, take off the feathers, depending on what the animal was, prep it, and then he'd give it to the cooks. And the number of girls in the audience who were like, "Oh no, I'm never eating it again. That's disgusting. Oh, it's so horrible." And you think, well, how do you think food comes out?
I know.
And like there's arguments against the way halal cooking, like how they sacrifice animals to how certain abattoirs probably work, and there's all these kind of things. Do you have experience in that kind of area? Have you had?
I don't. I don't really, as far as the as far as the raising of cattle. I've never been part of that process. Um, it's like I said, you just kind of it's hard because um, also because like the grass fed, grass finished, all that stuff. The more like a lot of times that is less marbled and it doesn't have as much fat in it because it's eating grass and stuff like that. So you got to kind of weigh the pros and the cons of what you're looking for, what you're used to about the characteristics of that steak, of that piece of meat, and where to get it from. So
So if you've got somebody just now thinking, okay, there's a butcher shop down my road, or there's a butcher shop in this market, and they go in and all they see is the amazing window filled with beautiful cats. And um, I remember back in the day when my mom was a school technician, she would send me in with a list of like hearts and kidneys and all sorts for the science experiments, and they'd be pulling out all these like it looked like a horror show in some bits, but they were such nice guys, always helping, and they would tell you how to cook things and how to do different. They recommend, like when I was asking for dinner, not for that stuff. So, how do we build a relationship with our local butcher? How do we start that kind of two-way communication? Because I don't like just asking people for things. I like, how's your day going? How you getting on? How can we befriend our local butcher? It's probably the best way of putting it.
yeah, I think the best thing to do is go in there and kind of like talk to your butcher, say, hey, tell them what you're trying to accomplish. It may be like you picked out a recipe and they can help you get a cut of meat that is best for that recipe. Because there'll be lots of, online is crazy. So people would come in to the shop and they'd be like, I want to do this recipe with this cut of meat. And you'd be like, that's probably not what you're looking for.
Hmm.
Or that's a more expensive way to do it. Maybe you want to use this cut of meat instead. I think it's just kind of going and using their expertise about different cuts of meat, where they come from. And again, it's getting tougher and tougher to find those highly skilled people. But again, just asking the questions and being a customer, like being a customer who you know comes in the shop a couple times a week or once every week, being that normal face that they've seen, you're gonna be able to get the get that service that you're looking for.
Because I always loved how attentive they were and how they always looked for the best thing for you. and how they would have the patter with the granny. They would chat to the new person coming in, the mum. They would show them and give them a wee bit extra, or they would go out their way, and it's a service and a set of skills and expertise we do not want to lose, and it's a real shame. So, how do you think these? I know these online markets now where you can box 8 steaks and get them sent to your house, and I know that the benefits of like sometimes cost because they can batch them and all this sort of stuff. But what's your opinions on these things? Are any of them any good? Have you found a service that kind of works that keeps the old age the traditions alive?
It's really tough to do those things online because again, you're just kind of clicking a box and they're
Yeah.
sending it to you. So, a lot of those online butcher shops, the way that they kind of can stay in business is by doing those more expensive cuts of meat, the wagyus, the primes, that kind of thing. And then you're so it's tough. It's tough to get that relationship it's almost impossible to get it from online sources, but it's like even when you go to a grocery store, it's really hard to get that relationship that way we once had with our food and with our butcher shops. But there's in big cities, in the United States, where I live, you can go and you can find these like I have one in my town that's called Revival Butcher Shop. They're trying to revive this
Yeah.
custom butcher experience. So I think you just got to kind of really search for those small, still running butcher shops, but they're out there. You just gotta do some. It's unfortunate, but you got to do some research and find one that's in your area.
Because I remember there was, I don't know if you ever seen Kitchen Nightmares with Gordon Ramsay a few years back,
Mhm.
and he did this thing about butchery, and he went to a couple of local colleges, and did a bit with the kids and showed them how to cut certain things and how to prepare it, and that's what he was saying. He was asking them like why they wanted to do it. Some were saying they were taken over from their father, or some were saying that they were interested in they'd worked at certain jobs when they were younger, enjoyed working with the meat, etc. And I think that's the thing, is that we're now moving away from human connection. We're losing that kind of, not even networking, just that kind of community spirit, and that's why I love that you're bringing these kind of things back, and you're breaking down the mystique behind it. Um,
It's time for a quick break. There are millions of potential products to buy, so how do you know which ones are worth your hard-earned money? Simple. You go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and explore those that will transform and improve your life. You'll find deals, listener exclusives, and special offers with some great companies. Recommendations are 100% honest and only on items Ian has tried or believes in. The companies showcased will make you a better man in all areas of your life. Simply go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and level up.
so how do we once we go there and we get a couple of things? Say we speak to, and we say we want this and we want to try that, and he gives us a couple of things to try. What do we do with them once we get them? Even if it's from the supermarket, how do we store them so they don't dry out? That they're not just coming in and oxidized or just squashed, or how do we make sure that they're adequate to cook? Is that rule of taking them out 10 minutes before good enough? Stick them in the fridge, take them out when you need them, or do you need a bit more than that?
Yeah, so if you're gonna get the big kind of subprimal cuts, like the whole ribeyes, the whole strips, they come in what's called a cryovac pack. So that is a vacuum sealed pack, and the meat in there can last like 30 days or more. I mean, you got a lot of days on that as long as it's in that original packaging. Once you get something that's cut already, you're going to have to use it pretty quickly, um, or freeze it, vacuum seal it, and freeze it, something like that. Um, but as far as like taking it out of the fridge before you want to use it, you know, I am under the, you know, I don't necessarily have a bunch of rules when it comes to steak, as far as like making sure it comes room temperature or whatever. You know, taking out for 10 minutes, it's not going to be anywhere close to room temperature. You're probably going to need more like 3 or 4 hours. And no steakhouse in the world takes their meat out of the refrigerator for 4 hours or 2 hours to make sure it comes room temp. So I don't know, it's a good experiment. I might do one on my channel of like how that doesn't make that much of a difference.
Look,
But like I come from a restaurant background where everything is cold. Everything starts out cold and that's how we do it. So um but just taking care of it in general is just making sure that you can expose it to oxygen before you want to cook it. If you want to, you can pre-season it. Some people do that a little bit. I don't really get into all of those little nuances because I don't know how much effect it actually makes. Because if you're going to do something that only increases the value maybe 5%, then I don't know if that's worth it for me personally. So you got to kind of make that decision and try it for yourself.
because I remember I was hearing that, and I think Sorted Food did that, where they did a couple of broke the rules of you don't you met was it wet into dry or dry into wet ingredients, and they found a lot of the rules didn't really matter, and it's like you're saying, it's like they're almost urban legends in a way. It's whereas like I'll take something out of the fridge, pork, chicken, whatever it is, and I'll maybe start canning it up and putting it into a stir fry or like it doesn't. I don't think it tastes any different. It's what you put it into. It kind of makes a difference, or how it's cooked, or you know, um, how then do you start prepping? What kind of oils are you a fan of? There's all these almond oils, peanut oils. There's tons of different things nowadays. What's a good beginner oil or a type of oil that we should? Is it just a vegetable oil good enough, or is it a
Yeah.
go-to?
So when you're thinking about oil you want to like sear your steak in, it's more about like the smoke point of oil. So because you want to get that really really hot, that's the biggest thing. So if you put like an olive oil in there, it has a kind of a medium smoke point. And if you put them all on a chart, all the oils, it has kind of a medium smoke point, and you can actually oxidize that oil and burn that oil with high heat. I like avocado oil or vegetable oil is good. Um, Beef tallow is actually great because it has a high smoke point, but it also adds that beefy flavor. So um, I'd love to do beef tallow if I have it around. But you want a higher smoke point. That's the biggest thing because you can oxidize and burn those oils, and that doesn't taste good.
Because that'd be a great set of videos to kind of see how different cooking with different oils affects things, and because something I love watching your videos is the skill that you have. You can see, that you're feeling it with your fingers, that you're basing automatically. You're kind of you're just naturally flow, and it's a joy to watch the skill set that you have as a chef. But how have you found that transition between being a chef to recording content to being a father at the same time as having to run a business as social media, talk to idiots like me? How have you found that kind of being a marketing almost yourself as much as the business compared to just cooking a storm like you used to do?
It has definitely been a transition of I did not expect any of the amount of people to resonate with my channel, so it's kind of came out of nowhere, and it's difficult. I mean, you do this, you put time into a video, and you're like, I've done kind of what I want to talk about and do this and that, and then you get the YouTube comments, of course, are can be can be a little rough at some point. And it's hard because too, like, it's not just me cooking, it's cooking and moving cameras and making sure the sound is good, and you know all these other things that have nothing, and editing, and all these things that have nothing to do with cooking. And I feel like sometimes, like, I've had some videos where I'm like, okay, this is at a great temperature, and by the time I move the camera to where I'm going to slice it, it's now overcooked. It's
Yeah.
like that time in which I had to do something else, and now something else has gone wrong. So it's it's definitely a different skill set. Like that's kind of why I like, it's like the fact that I have a background in this and I don't have to think about what I'm going to say when I'm teaching someone about meat, because I've done that several times. I've done it lots of times.
Mhm.
So I don't have to think about that. But what I'm thinking about all the time is, where's the camera? Can you hear the sound? Is my smoke alarm going to go off? Is, all these other ancillary things that, you know, I didn't even think about before I started a YouTube channel.
Because it's terrifying the amount of things you have to think, oh, camera, lighting, which I've realised mine's gone off, social media, there's so much to it. And do you think that's part of why you enjoy it as much as you do? Because you're now dealing with scratching your own itch. You're a beginner as much as in the YouTube side of things. So you're kind of leveling up your food journey again. You're now experiencing it from a new viewpoint.
Absolutely, because it's a completely new learning experience when you're learning how to edit, when you're learning how to um, film, different cameras, different all kinds of things. It is a completely different skill set. So yeah, it has been, and even the business side of it. If you want to even get into the business side, I never really got into that, and now I've launched my own products. I've had other, done some sponsorship deals, all kinds of stuff. And it's like, you're not prepared when you start out. I was like, I'm just trying to teach people how to cut steaks. I don't know how all those other stuff works.
I mean, talking of your knives, for example. I mean, I had a whole set of questions on how to maintain a knife. Because a lot of people get a knife and they use the same one till it breaks. They never sharpen it and then wonder why it barely cuts like anything. How do we maintain the knives? How do we pick knives? What's the our go-to knives? And how did you go from doing that and teaching people to creating your own knives and having them sold on Amazon? Because that's such an amazing thing. But what was that? Can you go into a little bit about how to pick a knife, maintain it, and then tell us about how you do these amazing things? Because you just seem to be hitting the ground strength to strength.
Well, I appreciate that. But, as far as people, like, you need a good chef's knife. That's like your go-to. You need like a good knife that you use every day. So that's where I suggest that people spend the most money, is in that knife that you use every day. And then when you go into some of these other knives, then it's kind of like, do I want to spend a ton of money on the different kinds of knives, and what do I use? Because the part that gets me is like when you get these like knife sets, and you get one maybe when you got married or whatever, you get a nice knife set, but you never use. There's been like 3 knives in there you never use.
Mm.
Well, I like to piece it out and get the knife that I'm going to use. So, um, and taking care of it is you're going to have to sharpen it every month or so of continuous use. You can use a honing steel, which is probably came in one of those sets, but it's like a long piece of metal that you take and you hone that steel, you hone that knife, and that's what you do every time you pull the knife out of the block. So what that does is basically, as you use your knife, it gets like, if you were looking at it, the blade would curve over. You can't see it, but it's happening so small. But that's what makes it dull. And that honing steel gets it back to sharp really quickly, and you can do it. You can do it every time, and then every time you use it, and then you go ahead and hit it with a sharpener, maybe once a month, once every 2 months, depending on how much you use it. So it's very simple to and there's lots of gadgets. That's the great thing too. Now with all kinds of technology, there's lots of gadgets. I just use a whetstone a lot of times, but there's other things you can buy online that'll help you get that precise 20-degree angle to make sure those knives stay nice and sharp.
It's quite
As
therapeutic, isn't
far
it? When you what's the word, when you're sharpening it, like it's I don't know. There's just something about it. I quite like that feeling of doing it. It's almost like it gets you ready for the zen of cooking.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of like, taking care of your tools of your trade, like making sure it's all set to go.
So how did you go from then sharpening a knife to creating a knife? Because
Yeah, that's a
that's
great story. So when my on that video I was talking about that did really well on all of a sudden on YouTube, I had suggested a certain brand of knife and that I used when I was in the butcher shop. I mean, I used this brand of knife over and over again, and and the style of knife is called a breaking knife. So it's a 10-inch knife that kind of curves at the end, and it helps you get through these big cuts of meat. And it's kind of
Mhm.
specific. Um, I had recommended that knife in that video, and a lot of people bought it from Amazon and from this other company. And then I decided after a couple of months, or I'll say maybe a year, that hey, why don't I try? I could probably design a knife that would help people do the exact same thing. And and I went to research it, just like everyone does. Went down Google, went on how to design a knife. What do you look for? We went through lots of different blades, lots of different handles to find the right ones. Um, One thing that I wanted to make sure is, because it's kind of a specialty knife, is that it was affordable for people, because you're not going to use a breaking knife as much as you use your chef's knife.
Mhm.
So I didn't want someone like, I could have made it much more expensive than it is. I could have made it $200 or whatever. Um, but I didn't think that, because my whole thing is like, I'm teaching people how to save money. So I wanted to make sure it was at first and foremost, it was affordable. So it's under $50 at the current, it's under $50, and it gets the job done, man. It's a good solid knife. So, and then we put it on Amazon, and it's been doing great. People have been really uh, not only from the channel, but also just from people from Amazon buying it. So I mean, it's been a real good decision to do that, and hopefully we got more products coming in the future.
I love how it's that moment of you don't just stop at affiliate sales. You're kind of like, people deserve a good knife. I'm going to go make one. And I love how you've got that passion to then level up and go, right, okay, I need to go and find and create something that I would use, that other people would use. And it's delighted how popular it is, and there's some raving reviews. So if now we've got our knives, and we get them, the chef's knives and things like that, are things like grinders, these kind of like food processors, how much of this is overkill compared to, what's a go-to list if, say, you had a wee bit of money to spend and you wanted to improve a home kitchen? What would you put on, as, say, you had a couple £100 to spend, a couple $100, whatever it is? What would you want people to put their money into?
Yeah, I think that a meat grinder, I think, is essential for what I do on my channel, as far as like so if you're going to break down your own cuts of meat, there's trim, there's fat, there's meat that's trimmed off. So to get total utilization of that, you need to have a meat grinder and grind your own ground beef, and it is super easy, and it's so much better than what you get at the grocery store.
Hmm.
Talk about freshness, quality. You're using like real steak cuts, real cuts of meat, like everything. Like, I know there's like a whole like pink slime. I don't know if you guys probably don't have this in the UK, but in the United States, there's all this like additives they put in some lower grade ground beefs, and you don't know what kind of meat, you don't know what kind of cuts are in there. Doing it yourself really helps out with that, and I think a meat grinder is pretty essential. Also, if you have a little bit extra money after that, I have a meat slicer that I use quite a bit. That I'll make lunch meat for my kids. Like I'll roast turkeys, we'll roast beef, stuff like that. It's just a higher quality of meat, so I like to do that. Um, Another gadget I really love is a sous vide. to cook as far as cooking. So it's that sous vide one that you can it it heats water to a very specific temperature, so you can put the meat in a bag in the water, and it'll cook that meat till exactly the right temperature. And then you pull it out, you sear it, and it's perfect every time. So there's just I like I like meat gadgets, so or I like cooking gadgets. So
I love how
those are a few of my favorites.
I love how you're actually just like picking the things that just get, just gets it done. Because there's all these amazing things you can spend like hundreds of pounds on a thermometer, but you don't need some of these amazing things. They're good if you can have the money for them. But I've always wanted to try, like, was it chuck, like trying different steaks, um, like sort of beef mince and all that for different beef burgers. Absolutely love a burger. So I always tell myself I'm going to go and try different percentages of fat and different types of meat. And haven't done it yet, but it's on my to do list. And I was watching one of your videos the other day, and I was like, okay, I need to go get one. And then I remember watching one of you were mentioning sous vide, and I was like, damn it, now I want to go get a sous vide. And I love how the encouragement from it, and you make it look fun and enjoyable. But for a lady who's got kids, or for a young guy who wants to go to the gym and needs to batch his food, or just somebody that wants to cook a bit better, I probably shouldn't have narrowed it down that much. But how do we plan meals if we're purchasing these bigger bits of food? How do we? Because you've got an amazing blog post on how to split a pork chop. I'd love to see more videos like that. Like, here's 3 different meals you can make from this bit of meat. Say if it's chicken, if it's pork, whatever. How do we plan for variety, for feeding kids, feeding ourselves, but foods that we can take for lunch? We can give to pack lunches to the schools, eat at work. Like, that's not just cooking at home. How do you plan with your own kids to kind of give them good food, but also food that's livable food, if that makes sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so for me, I will go and when I'm buying meat, and I will get a variety of different cuts of meat, and then come back. We'll make a plan for how to cook those, but also we are, using the vacuum sealer to kind of put them in smaller quantities, because you get, like, I go to Costco a lot, so these big warehouse stores, you buy, you know 10 pounds of chicken. So what are we going to do with that? So we'll make it in smaller portions so that you can take one package out and make dinner with it. With the ground beef, I'll do the same thing. Either you grind it yourself or you get it somewhere else. Go ahead and buy it in bulk, but make it in a smaller package. That way you
Hmm.
can kind of like, okay, I know I have 2 pounds of ground beef to work with for this meal, and I have some in the freezer ready to go. Um, as far as what I do with my kids, I mean, I have, so 3 of my 4 kids are boys. They're in that stage where they are eating the whole house. They're eating everything they can get their hands on. So it is a lot of meat all the time. I will make these I'll put several pounds of chicken on the grill, and then I'll wonder where it all went the next, like, after dinner's done. So for us, we go through a lot of stuff, a lot of food, but it's just, like I said, making that plan and leftovers. I got one of my sons. He does not eat. He only eats leftovers for lunch, which is kind of good, because you always have those stuff stuck in your fridge. But he goes through and knocks out all those leftovers. But, like, I mean, just whatever your kids like, whatever your family likes, just double down. Keep making that stuff. Keep making those hits that they really like, and then adding every once in a while, adding a new something in there so that they can enjoy something new. I think trying to do something new is really hard for kids, but it's something they need to do because they need to taste some new foods.
Because if not, we'd just be eating the same thing over and over. Yeah, I know that feeling. Because I like doing like the batching things, like having chicken and pork, cutting them up into cubes, and then putting different sauces onto them, and then I like to make a curry, sausage casserole, steak, whatever it is, like like multiple dishes, and then freeze them. So I just usually put them into these little deli containers and stick them in the freezer once they've cooled down. Is that good enough? I mean, I'm not a culture vulture. I mean, my palate's probably atrocious. How should we freeze meats to keep them? Is there rules to these or
Well,
techniques?
like so if it's raw, then like I said, like the vacuum sealer in the is the best way to do it and put it in the freezer. If it's cooked, yeah, you can just again you could vacuum seal it or you can put them in different Ziploc bags. It just depends on how long you're going to keep it. I would not suggest putting things in the freezer for a long period of time. Within a couple of weeks, a month, you should be going through that stuff because we everybody has got the stuff in the bottom of their freezer that they forgot about that doesn't look too good that
Yes.
they end up having to throw away. So
You can't
if you
identify it
can,
anymore.
yeah, because it all looks the same when it's frozen, right? So you got to make sure you write it down. Like, right, I'm not the best at this organizational wise, but I need to get better at writing what's on the thing because be bringing up this package of mystery meat here that I don't know what it is, but yeah, write it down, write on the package, and then try to cycle through all that stuff in a timely fashion. Is my biggest tip.
So how then do you flex the creative urge? Because you seem very a happy, guy. You seem to be very like living life, and I'm not surprised. You've got a beautiful family. You do these amazing things. But how do you review these? Like, how do you kind of look back at how the show's going, decide on the journey of how it's going to go, look at the videos you're going to make? How's your review? Because I remember interviewing Hazard Lee, the fighter pilot, and he was saying they'll sometimes listen to one radio call that lasts 5 seconds 20 times to see how it could have been improved, the quality, the content, the words used, the meaning given. Well, there's so much to it. How now that you are the business as much as the show, how do you review your progression and make sure that you're getting family time? Brad the businessman, Brad the family, the father, Brad the family guy, time with your wife, and also create ideas. How do you juggle these many different plates?
Yeah, it's tough. Juggling has not always been my juggling all these things hasn't always been my strong suit. It's like I will get down a rabbit hole of research and then what I want to talk about, and then I probably have a spreadsheet that has over 100 to 200 ideas all the time that I'm always adding to of this would be cool to do a video like this. And then, I try when I'm thinking about the videos I'm gonna make, I try just to put on this list everything I can think of, even if it's not possible to make. Because again, it's just me. I don't have a whole crew, I'm not doing these crazy videos. So but I try to get all these ideas out because then it'll spark something else that'll be not so intricate, like, oh, I can do that or I can do this. Um, but yeah, I just try to, anyone who works from home, it is really difficult to try to like carve out that time for family and carve out that time for business. Um, and I'm probably not the best at it. I'm working on getting better, but yeah, I kind of have this obsessive personality where I got to focus on one thing for a while and then move on to the next thing. So,
Yep.
like this summer, we've had a ton of family time. We've been on a couple vacations and done all that stuff, and now the kids are going to go back to school here pretty soon. So I'm ready to get back into making some more videos and and concentrate on that.
I know that feeling. It's like every time you learn something new, it's like a new shiny toy, and it's like, oh, about social media, SEO, and before you can go down so many different rabbit holes, and even just making videos. There's so many areas. Now you've probably worked in some of the most amazing places. You will know a lot of top chefs. What is it about them, about their approach to food, or their skill set, or just them that makes them good chefs? What have you found about likes yourself that just have this knack for food, and for people like myself who maybe can cook certain things, but yeah, I wouldn't impress anybody that much. How would you show what a top performer does and how we can emulate them to be a bit better? Or is that what your channel is aiming to do?
I think like the top chefs like in the world, they really love food and they love to do the service of working in a restaurant. So hospitality is always very big as part of their of you really got to love people. You got to want to impress people with your food, and that's what makes you strive to do some of the things that other people wouldn't do. Working tirelessly in a restaurant, doing the same thing over and over and over again. So it's the people in the restaurant business are wired a little differently. They're obsessed. They are people. The great ones are really like singularly focused on perfection, and I think that's the difference between a person who does it professionally and a person who does it like person who just cooks. It's trying to um, learn those basic techniques and practice them over and over and over again. Because I think what people do is they'll make a recipe and they'll make it one time and then they'll be like, oh, that didn't work. Well, you got to make that recipe like 10 times. And then once you
Mm.
make it 10 times, then you can kind of decide if that's for you or not and how easy it is to do. Because in a restaurant, they're making the same dish hundreds of times, thousands of times, So I think it's the repetition that really can help the home cook is, don't give up, just keep going, keep making something, keep making it over and over again and practicing the same technique.
I love that. I love that idea, like that style of cooking. You don't need to know everything and have all the fancy gadgets. You just need to kind of explore, but it's also enjoy it as much. I think because sometimes people get so wrapped up in, are you vegan? Are you a vegetarian? Are you this? Are you that? We kind of just forget it's like food shouldn't just be fuel. You should also enjoy what you're eating and savor it. And it's I'm trying to think which interview it was. I think maybe it was Ben Ebrel, when he was talking about it's also a thing. Food should be getting everybody around the communal kind of, like back in the tribe day kind of thing. You all sat around and ate and talked and connected over a plate of food, and it's sadly disappearing. And that's why I'm so grateful to my parents. We ate at a dinner table with our family. You all took time to stop and eat with each other. I've seen people who don't have that, and I feel for them because it's sometimes how you connect to your family on a deeper level at dinner times and things. But how do you then take your time away from this? You've got a busy schedule, you've got 4 kids, you're married, you've got to have time for yourself, you've got to create the show, do the videos, etc. It must be knackering. How do you relax away from this? What's your escapism, or what's a guilty pleasure, or something that you do away from the show that lets you just be you and recharge?
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do, and I'm lucky that I live here in kind of the south of the United States. I can do it almost all year round. I love to have just a fire in the backyard. I have a little fire pit, and I will sit there and stare at the fire and just hang out. And I'll even if no one's around, I'll do it by myself. Like I love that little bit of solace and that little bit of quiet
Hmm.
because I don't get a lot of it, obviously, in my life. But yeah, those are the moments that I really enjoy. And people can, if I can have friends and family come with me, that's even better. But like just having that little bit of quiet um, in my week somewhere is really something that I really enjoy and try to replicate.
It must be difficult with so many things kind of ongoing, but how do you think you've changed then as you've gone through this journey and now you're helping so many people, but how have you changed since you become married, a father? How is your approach to food and life and just what you want, for your personal self, your goals, for your kids, etc.? How has all that changed since you've gone through these transitions in life from being maybe the chef who wanted just to be the best to now to being helping home cooks? How do you think you've changed along this journey?
Yeah, I think that does kind of resonate with me as like when I first started working when I was, 18, 19 in restaurants and stuff. It was all about getting the skills and just working everywhere I could. I worked lots and lots of hours. And then when I got married and had kids, it was more like it's not about me anymore. It's about the family. It's about, and I took a huge step back as my kids got older, or well, I have twin boys, and when the twin boys were born, I actually quit for a little while and just was a stay-at-home dad. So it was kind of a abrupt kind of like, okay, your career doesn't matter anymore. You got to, focus on the family, focus on kids, and it was a big transition. And as they're getting older, as they got older, then I transitioned back into doing something different. And I mean, it's just you evolve as a person
Yeah.
as you get older, and you realize it's not all about you, and it's about your family and about the things that you can provide other people. I think that's the biggest transition that I've gone through. And now I'm just doing even more on a bigger scale, teaching people, over YouTube. Like, yeah, like I want to help. I want to help people get to where they want to go. So that's kind of been a big transition for that time period.
I love that. I love that. I love that way that you look at it, and you're more than happy to step back to help the family unit get stronger and to sort of continue. And did that help your cooking? Did that encourage you in a way because you weren't just cooking for maybe faceless guests? You were now cooking for like people that you loved more than life itself. You know that you were seen the joy that good food did to your love, your family members, to then you thinking, I need to replicate this to teach other people how to do this. Did it open another part of you?
It was really different because it goes from being like highly scheduled, high pressure, to then, hey, we're just hanging out, we're at home, we got a ton of other things to do as well as make food. So I think it was so much of making sure that they were taken care of,
Hmm.
and especially in that time when they were all little, because we had three kids under 2 years, like 2 years
Yikes.
old for a little while, and it was like okay, it's all hands on deck. We're lucky if we get any food, like lucky if anything gets cooked. And then as they grow older, then it's like teaching them how to cook. And my son actually yesterday, it was kind of a great story. He came up to me earlier in the week and says, I want to cook this meal. And he gave me like, it was like a French inspired meal. He loves like things that are from France, and I guess the Olympics are going on right now, so that was another thing.
Hmm.
And he got the recipes, he got everything, and we cooked it together. And it was like that was some of the best times I've had just cooking with him. And
back to teaching and helping people?
No, I'm really I'm clued in on what's going on as far as what's going on in YouTube cooking space, what's going on in the space of new technologies, new kitchen gadgets, all that stuff. I really try to keep up to date on that stuff because it's something that people need to know about. If there's a new gadget that's coming out, I want to be able to give my kind of spin on it and how I would use it or what I would do with it. But in turn, it's going as we get more and more technologically advanced.
And I know you're going to go so many places, and I know I've used up so much of your time, but I'd love to have you back on and really get into different things because there's so many rabbit holes I'm trying to avoid going down. So I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. But what would you want people to take from this till we can do our second round? What would you want them to come back to you in 6 weeks, a month, a year, whatever, and say, I listened to your podcast and I did X. What would you want them to do or tell you about their journey?
I just would love people to experiment with cutting their own meat because it is it is very it's rewarding. It's very rewarding when you start to learn where these cuts come from and how easy it is and the practice that's involved. And it's just very fulfilling. So I would love if everyone could at least try it once because you'll get addicted to it, but you really will because you'll be like, okay, I've done this. Now what's the next project I need to do? What's the next project I need to do? So that would be one thing. I just love everyone to just give it, even the simplest thing, just give it a try. Cutting meat a try.
I like it. And what would you want people to do now, apart from buying the knives? And how can we follow you on this journey? What's your social media, your website? I'd love to see more blog posts and more like different videos and reels from you and all these kind of things. So how can we make sure we follow along and find out all the amazing stuff you're doing?
Yeah, the best place to is just on YouTube, Butcher Wizard on YouTube. I also have a Facebook group, a private Facebook group that we're doing that's relatively new, but it is how to cut meat.